Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to class today. Thank you for joining me. Whether you're watching live or you're watching the recording, I just appreciate you watching. So really the majority of everything that we need to cover was kind of covered in the pre-recorded video that was posted last week. So what I'd like to do today is just kind of go through and hit the high points, just do some review and just kind of make sure that we have everything covered here. Because the vast majority of everything that we really need to do, we've already learned how to do. Right? You know, when we looked at that video from last week, we were basically, 2 weeks ago, we talked about creating a new table and all that kind of stuff. In last week's video, you looked at adding an entry to an existing table. We'll do that again today, just as a review. We'll look at removing a record, which again, easy peasy, right? Look at modifying records using our update statement and altering our existing tables using those statements, right? So really about everything that we would need to do as a part of our module, we have kind of done. So no big deal. So we're just gonna kind of go through and do a little bit of review and do a little bit of work here with manipulating databases, adding records, and things of that nature. So let's go ahead and review inserting a record. So we want to insert a new record into a table. So we're going to use our insert statement to insert the values that we want to be inserted into our table. And so we have this insert clause. And really the insert statement is different regarding, whatever flavor of SQL that we use, right? If we use, Microsoft SQL or SQLite, or any of the other different flavors of SQL, the insert statement of SQL is actually the same. Right? It's the same across all flavors of SQL. That is one thing that they've kind of done right here, which is pretty good, right? So we can say that we've learned how to insert a row into a database, and we can do it in any SQL-based database, whether it is Postgres or MySQL or Microsoft SQL or whatever. Right, and so that's good. And so really with MySQL, we can define multiple sets of values so that we can insert multiple records at one time, which is also nice. Right, but an example of one of these queries looks like this. And so we use our insert statement, and we say we're going to insert a record. Right, so we're going to take a record, and we're going to insert a record. We're going to insert into, and then we have the table name that we're going to insert into. In this case here, our table is called Shippers2. Right, when we get into our practice database that we're using here, I believe we made the champions table 2 weeks ago, right? It's been a little while since we have gotten into there, but I believe we made the champions table 2 weeks ago. So we're going to insert into Shippers2 the shipper ID, the shipper name, and the phone. So these are each of the columns that are in said table. Right, one of the interesting things here that we need to notice is that the order of the data, the order of the column names as we have it presented here in this first set of parentheses, matches the order of the values in the second set of parentheses. Right, so I can actually put these in any order as long as the order matches in the second set of parentheses. Right, so for example, I have shipper ID first, shipper name second, and phone third. If I flipped that around and had phone first, shipper ID second, and shipper name third, if it said if it had the phone number first here, the shipper ID second here, and the shipper name third here, it would work just fine, just so long as the columns were in the same general locations, right? It's just matching the order value to know which column to put the data value in, right? So if we were to look at this way, right, we'd see, okay, shipper ID. Shipper ID is in the first position. We're going to look for the value that's in the first position here. That is 4. So we'd put 4 in the shipper ID column. Shipper name is in the second position here. Second position. DHL is in the second position here. And then phone is in the third position here. And phone number is in the third position here. So they correspond. Right? So whatever's in the first position in the first set of parentheses, that corresponding data value should be in the first position of the second set of parentheses. So if we look at our database table here, what we've been using, well, first let's make sure that we are using tennis, because that is our database that we are using. And let's go ahead and remind ourselves, let's describe champions, since that's the table that we are editing here. And we are going to describe champions. And so you can see in champions, we have 3 columns here. And we can kind of leave this here, or we can kind of write it down to make note of it. Right, we have a champ ID. Champ ID. We made that our primary key for this table. And that is an integer value. And I'm actually writing this on a notepad while I'm kind of reading it out here. So, it'd be kind of a best practice for you all to kind of take up as you're considering, what you want to do here. I have a team number here. A team number. Now, we decided that this could be a tiny int, right? Because when we looked in matches and we looked in teams, there was only 2 team values that this could be, either 1 or 2. And that if we expanded and had a few more teams, right, we probably wouldn't break the bounds of the tiny int of the tiny int data type. And we have the win year. The win year. And we made that the year MySQL data type there. And so when we write our table, one of the other things that we notice here is that we made all of these not null, right? So that means we have to have it when we create a record, we have to have a data value for each of these columns, right? We can't leave the data value empty, so we need to make sure that we have a corresponding data value for each of these columns. So since I wrote all of that down, I'm going to remove my describe champions here. And I'm going to just write an insert statement here. Or before I do that, let's just select star from champions. Just to show that there currently is nothing in champions, right? Like there's nothing there, right? There's no records. It's just an empty table. So we are going to insert into champions. Not sure why I want to put a T in champions so badly today. But we have our 3 columns, right? We have our champ ID. We have our team number. And we have our win year. And you notice I put them in all lowercase here, right? SQL's friendly with us, right? SQL will let us do that. We can get away with that. And we're going to put in there the corresponding values. So since we have champ ID first, and that is an integer, we're just going to put a champ ID of 1 in there. If we were doing some advanced SQL stuff, we would we'd actually write some code to actually make this auto increment for our primary key here. Since we're not really worried about that at this level, we'll just try to keep it as simple as possible. Team number here can be either 1 or 2. Let's go with 1. And the win year, since most of the people have birthdays in kind of the mid to late 60s to early 70s, let's try to add maybe 20 years to that. So let's say 1980. So since this is the year data type, we will put 1980 in quotes like such. Right, so now we have champ ID of 1, team number 1, 1980. And we can run that. We can see we don't get any output here, right? Because this is not an output query. This is an insert query. So we're not bringing anything back to us. This is just stuff that we're putting into our database. But after we've done this one time, we can select star from champions. And we can see that now we have a record in there. Right? Champ ID 1, team number 1, win year was 1980. Which is exactly what we're looking for here. Right? We just took a record and we added it in there. Now just to prove that we can do things in different orders, right? Let's write another insert into query here. We're going to insert into champions. This time we're going to start out with win year. Then we're going to go to champ ID. And then we're going to finish with team number. And we're going to do the following values. All right, so since win year is first in the first set of parentheses, then we have to put a year first in the second set of parentheses. So this will be 1981. Champ ID is second, so that's going to be 2. And let's say team number 1 had a good back-to-back season. So we can run that now. We see we got a nice green check mark down here at the bottom. 1 row affected. Nothing returned. Because again, insert into is not a return query. It is an insert query. It is a query designed to send data into. So we're going to select star from champions. And now we see we have 2 records in there. Champ ID, team number, and win year. So even though they weren't in the same order, they're not in the same order as the columns in the database, it doesn't matter. As long as the data is put in the corresponding columns, you're good. Now you might be wondering, like, what would happen if I tried to put the wrong data type in there? And that's one of the reasons why we do the data type. Right? It will yell at us. Do our value. Let's do our champ ID, team number, win year. Let's do the following values. This champ ID is 3. This team number will be 2. And this time, instead of the win year being in quotes, like the way that a year should be, in SQL, let's just do 1982, just as an integer. And it let us do it. right? And I think a year might actually be able to be both, since it is just a single column year, come to think of it. So let's actually do this again, but this time put in our item here as a string and do that. It is not having any problem at all with this, which is odd. I would have thought it would have yelled at me a little bit more. But again, SQL is friendly, right? If we go in here and look, it is returning everything. And I think just simply because it is a 2, even if we put it in quotes, it's probably typecasting it. So I would imagine if we did something like this, it might have a little bit more of a problem. So let's try that instead. Yeah, there we go. So, right, if we get the wrong data type in there, it tells us, you know, incorrect integer value 2 for column, team number at, you know, blah, blah, blah. So if we do the wrong thing, it tells us we did the wrong thing. And it doesn't add anything. Right, like if I go and look at my table here, it didn't add that row at all, right? That row's just not in there. So the error prevents it from doing anything. So we can go back and add that in there. Just so we can have some records. And so now if we look at our champions table now, we can say we have our champ ID, we have our team number, and we have our win year. And we can work with that. Right, this is now a table that we can work with. You know, we can say, oh, who won? You know, who was the captain of the team that won in 1983? Okay, well, 1983, that's team 2. If we look at the teams table, we can, you know, we can see that we have our team number and our players in there. And we can work with all of that, right? Just more information where we can work with things. Now let's say, whoops, right? We added this last record here and we didn't intend to, right? We meant to, you know, it's a little premature. We need to delete that record. So let's talk about removing a record from our table. So in order to remove a record, we use a delete statement. And a delete statement looks a bit similar to our select statements because we need to use a where clause. We need to use one of those where conditionals like we were using with our select statements to actually meet our condition for our delete statement. Right, that way our SQL table knows which row to delete. So we can delete more than one row at once using a complex select statement, the way that we were doing, in the previous module. Like that. We can say, oh, we'll just delete everything that has ID number bigger than blah, 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 right? And it'll delete all of them. But this last one here is the big deal, right? Once it's deleted, it is gone forever. There is no undo in a database. If you accidentally drop a table, if you accidentally delete a bunch of rows, you have to re-enter all of the data. So here's an example. Delete from whatever table, where, whatever clause. Right, so let's do that example here. Want to get rid of row 5 here. Delete from champions, where champ ID equals 5. Simple. Right, that's going to get rid of that 5th row. We can see green check mark, 1 row effective. Now, you might be thinking, well, what happens if I run this again? I can. And it'll give me a green check mark, but it'll also tell me 0 rows affected because none of the rows in my table now meet that condition. Right? So this is a properly written statement, but none of the rows in my table meet that condition, so it didn't actually delete a row after it's already been deleted. So I can select star from champions, and we can see that that row is gone. Right, but again, there's no undo button here. Right, so when we delete a row from a table, we need to make sure that that's what we want to do. We need to make sure that we wanted to delete that row. Because if we delete something by accident and we end up needing it later, we could be in a bit of trouble, right? Because if it ends up we needed something that we deleted, well, we can't get it back. Right, we have to enter that data back in there. So in fact, let's do that. Let's get a little bit of practice in again doing that. So let's insert into champions team number, champ ID, win year, the values. In this case, right, we're putting the team number first. So it's team number 1, champ ID 5, and then 1984. And insert like so. Oh, no, wait, did I put team number 1 in there? Team number 1 didn't win. It was team number 2 that won. So, oh man, what do I want to do now? That I want to modify the values for some of my existing rows in my table. Well, I can use my update statement. Right, I can take my update statement and I can set it, set the value of the column that I want to change to be the new value. based on a where clause to specify which row that you want to update. Again, that where clause is like a conditional in my SQL. So if we look at some example here, just some random example, this is a shippers table here for shipping. Again, right, like we've been looking at this throughout the semester, right? So we're going to say update shippers 2. So we're taking our shippers 2 table and we're updating it, and we're setting the phone number column. We're changing the value that is in the phone number column for where the shipper name is FedEx. So in this case, right, the course of action here would be like, oh, FedEx has changed their phone number, so we need to update their phone number in our database. Update our database, update our database table, set the phone number to be the new phone number where the shipper name is FedEx. Right, and so we can do that in our table here. So we're going to update champions. And we're going to set team number equal to 2. Because team number 1 didn't win it. Team number 2 won it. Where champ ID equals 5. Right, and so just so we see order of operations here, right, I'm going to select star from champions before running that update query. And then I'm going to select star from champions after running that update query. Right, so here in this tab, we should see the data as it currently sits. It should run the updates. And then it should show us the new data. Right, so when we run this, we see we get 3 check marks here. So in our first tab here, that's before it ran the updates, we see that champ ID 5 has team number 1 as the champion. And in our second tab, we see that's after it run the update. Right? Remember, I don't have a tab for update because update is not a return command. Update is a send command. So it's just making a change in my database. My select is my return command, which is why I have to run it to make sure that everything worked. But here I can see that I have a number 2 in that team number column. So it's updated my champion properly. Right? 1 here, 2 here. 1 here, 2 here. So let's say now that I want to add a table or add a column to this table. Right? We can say that, okay, there's another bit of data that I want to add here. I want to add a division column here. And then we're gonna change our mind as well, right? And remove it. But let's say I'm going to add a division column here. Well, we can use our alter table statement to alter our current table. And so if we want to add a column to an existing table, we use an alter table add column query to add the column to our table. Now, when we use an alter table add column query, we need three things. We need the name of the column. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to call our column division. We need the data type of the column. It's going to be a string, right? We'll call it like juniors and seniors or something like that, right? Whatever, it doesn't really matter. So it'll be varchar. We'll say varchar. If we're going to say it's juniors and seniors, those are 6. We'll say varchar 8. Just in case, we might decide to change the names or whatever. We'll say varchar 8 there. And the location in the schema where you'd want to put the column, basically after whatever. So if we look at an example here, alter table shipments, add column total shipments as an integer column after shipper name, right? That's an example of one of these queries. If we did it here, we could say alter table champions, add column division varchar 8 after, let's go team number. Right, so it's going to put our column between team number and win year. So if we run this, we see it runs. 0 rows affected, 0 duplicates, 0 warnings. Right? Why did it impact 0 rows? Right? Well, because it didn't add a row or didn't do anything with a row. It added a column. Right? So if we select star from champions now, we see that we have a division here. And if we wanted to, we could go in there and we could add we could go in there and we could update that data value there for division. Right? The same way that we were doing the update statements before. We can just say something like update champions set division equals junior where, let's just make them all junior division. So champ ID greater than or equal to 1. So let's just make them all junior division. Just so we can have data in all of those columns, just so it doesn't look weird. Right, we're going to be immediately getting rid of that column anyway, right? So it's not a huge deal. That's how we'd add a column in an existing table. And if we wanted to get rid of a column in an existing table, well, we would use a drop column query. And so dropping the column deletes it from the table. And it also deletes all the associated data. And remember, there is no undo. So when you drop the column, it is gone forever. And all the data that's in that column is gone forever. So we see alter table, shipments, drop column, whatever the name of the column is. Right, so in this case, it would be drop column, champions, or actually alter table. I'm ahead of myself. Alter table champions, drop column, division. Right? It reads basically like the order of operations of the way that you think about doing it in English, right? Alter table champions. Let's get the champions table. So which table are we going to alter? We're going to alter the champions table. What are we going to do to it? We're going to drop the division column. And we're going to get it out of there. All good. So now if we select star from champions, that column's going now. Now, I think the last thing that I want to do is I want to, and this will be the last thing that I kind of cover in our review today, and I think it'll be a good place for us to kind of wrap up everything, is in renaming an existing column. And so let's just say you want to rename an existing column. You can use an alter table change query. So let's say instead of win year, you want to call it year 1. Right? Because that makes a little more sense. Right? There are multiple reasons why somebody might want to change the name of the column. Right? One is that sometimes things change. As things change, it might be a good idea to go ahead and change the column name just so it makes more sense. 2 is for flexibility. And 3 is for simplicity. Just to make things easier to remember and work with, right? So we can look at it this way. Alter table. Whichever table that we are altering, we are going to change whichever column. Old name, new name. And this is also a good time to where if we want to change the data type of that column, we can change that here as well. So in this case, I'm going to add a alter table. Alter table. Which table am I altering? I'm altering champions. I am changing the win year column into the year 1 column. And it's still going to have the year data type. So we're going to run that. And so now when I select star from champions. It is now called year 1 instead of win year, which makes life a whole lot easier for us, as that's a lot easier to remember. And so I think that fairly well covers it. That hits all the big points for everything that we need to do for the module in terms of modifying our tables. So I believe that's all that I want to cover for today. We'll hang out in the chat for just a couple minutes, just in case anybody who is watching live has any questions. If you're watching the recording and you have questions, please feel free to email or Teams message. But that's, again, all that I have for you for today. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.